So could you tell us a little about how your son dropped out of school and learned about the Lady Washington?
Yes, I happened to be at a conference, and the man sitting next to me at a table was talking about this
What
ship.
was the conference?
The conference was, it was a Civil Air Patrol conference. My son and I were both members of Civil Air Patrol, and I forget where the conference was, Yakima or somewhere. And so this man was telling me about how his daughter had gone on this ship, this tall ship. He was telling me all about tall ships, and his daughter had gone on the previous summer and how great it was. And so I went home and I left the information on the kitchen table for my son John, and the next day I said, "John, did you see that? It looks pretty cool, doesn't it?" And he says, "Yeah," he was interested, and so he actually on his own applied for it and sent in all the paperwork and went and got his physical. And
What age was he?
What's that?
What age was he?
He was 17. Yeah. And he had been a kind of kid who said, he had told us, "Mom, I'm just not learning anything in high school." And so we had tried different schools, and finally he just kind of dropped out of high school. So we were looking for a direction that he could go. And this seemed like a very cool educational thing that he could go and do. So when he got to the boat, the Lady Washington that he was on first, he, within the first three days, he had learned all the lines. He was climbing everywhere. They were calling him the squirrel because he could climb everywhere, and he was doing so well, and he learned everything so well, and he loved it. He totally loved it. And so he did his first 2 weeks of training, and then after that got a job as a volunteer, the gunner. He got to shoot the cannons, and also was the steward, was in charge of the safety and all that kind of thing. And so then years went by, and he finally, about 4 years ago, went to Astoria to a maritime school and got his captain's license. And so he's been a captain ever since.
So when he dropped out of high school, what did he do with his spare time?
With his spare time? Well, he really wasn't doing much at the time, but he went to get his GED, and he went for the practice test, and they said, "You don't need a practice test, just come back and take the real test." And he just went without even studying and got like a 98%. And but still, that was about the time that I heard about the ship, the Lady Washington, and that's when he went for his training at that time. He was a good kid, just school wasn't his thing, is all. At one point, one of the high schools we sent him to was a boarding school, and he was doing things like in the middle of the night rappelling out of his third floor dorm window with the rappelling stuff that he had made in a welding class. And so he was just sort of an adventurous kind of kid, and I think school was boring for him. When he hit 4th grade, he became a bookworm, and he was very reading books a lot. And he was the kind of kid we'd go out on hikes, and he would do like this little rock climbing up these cliffs, or he would run ahead of us and hide in the woods, and when we passed, he'd come up in back of us, kind of thing. Just things like that. He was adventurous, I'd say.
Do you have any other kids?
Yeah, I have 2 other children. John's the middle. I have a daughter, Sally, who's a nurse now, and a son, Will, that is a computer guy at Washington State University.
Which one is older?
My daughter's the oldest, then John is the middle, and then Will is the youngest. He hasn't always sailed on just the Lady and the Chieftain. At one point, he went to the East Coast and sailed on the HMS Bounty. Got on in Florida, and it's sort of some of the same things that these guys do, is taking tourists out on trips. But then they went on a sail all the way up the East Coast, and they were heading to Washington D.C. And off the coast of the Carolinas, there were some awful storms, and that ship had all kinds of problems. They had electrical fires on board, and their water maker went out, and their engine went out a couple times, and they had to get a tugboat to keep them from running aground. They had just problem after problem after problem, and that made some really good sea stories. And it was raining, and the crew slept on like the 3rd deck down, but the the decks leaked, and so it was like dripping water down on them while they were trying to sleep.
Were you on the ship?
I was not on the ship. This is one of some of his sea stories.
Oh, he describes stuff very well.
About being on the Bounty, yeah. And so the ship was in such bad shape that when he got to Washington, D.C., and they wanted to go on up to New York, and he said, "Sorry, I'm out of here." It was like really bad shape. So that's some of my favorite sea stories. He was in it's called Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World, and that came out in 2002 or 3, I can't remember. I think 2002, and starred Russell Crowe.
What was it about?
It was a sea adventure story back in the 1805 or 1806, where a British ship was going over to the Pacific. They had to round the Horn, of course, into the Pacific Ocean, and there were privateers or not privateers. They were actually a British warship that was against the French, and so they were being chasing this French ship, and had some great battles. And you should see it. It's pretty cool movie.
Kids can watch it?
Kids can watch it, yeah. There's some violence with cannons blowing up things and things, but it was pretty cool. And so
did they have real cannons in the movie?
In the movie.
Did they fire real cannons?
Well, you know, in the movies, they make everything safe, but to look real. And so even they had both a real ship that went out sailing on the Pacific Ocean, but they also had a ship that was in this place in like a giant pool with the ocean in the background, so it looks like it's in the ocean. And they had like these machines that made the boat like go with the waves, and machines that blew water to make it seem like the storms, you know, in the water. And yeah, it was all like, well, in the movies they just do it all kind of fake, but John got to be...
Did they fire real cannonballs?
I think they did not. But it's the movies. They make it look like they did, but they really didn't. And John was an extra.
They just fired blanks.
He was not one of the main characters in the movie, but he was, one of the 40 guys that was in the background. He was an extra. And he got to know Russell Crowe, whose nickname is Rusty. And yeah, he was spent 6 or 7 months down in Rosarito, Mexico, where they did the filming there. It was a 20th Century Fox studio down there. I'll say this is hard work, but he likes it. Really hard work. And I'm real proud of him, very proud of him. He's done great.
I've probably got 1 A in a science class ever. I think I mostly got B's in science and mostly got B's in math. It wasn't my favorite subject, but now that I use it every day, it really, the practicality of it makes it a lot more intriguing to me. A lot of times in math class, it's just they're throwing numbers at you and it doesn't mean anything. But when those numbers are like, when are we going to get there? It's a little more intriguing, a little more hands-on, and the rewards of doing the math are a little bit better. So, yeah.